it was just this moment. It was like midnight. I was sitting on the floor of my office cleaning or doing something, like just, I don't know, staying up late for no reason, one of those kind of nights. And it just hit me. I was like, fuck yourself happy. That's the title. And it was just the weirdest, most pure, like download moment where I wasn't even thinking about the podcast. It has always been something in my mind to do, but in that moment, it just came through and I was like, boom, ding, that's it.
Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I am your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Hello, Judy. Hello, viewers and listeners. We're back to viewers and listeners. And the way we're doing it now, folks, and I want to explain this for the benefit of wherever you get this from. Most of you are hearing this because what we do is we're posting the sound to all the podcast platforms. So wherever you get your podcast, you're probably just getting sound only. But I will tell you, if you want to see us and see our guest, and we had a fabulous interview today, we'll get to that in just a second, then all you have to do is go to my YouTube channel, Bruce Chalmer, or if you go to my blog, or we'll put a link for this also on our CTN7 website. Anyway, one of those ways you will get to the YouTube version and you actually get to watch it as well as hear it. And so we hope you will do that. So, Judy, tell folks the title of our episode today.
From Sex Worker to Relationship Coach, an interview with Hannah Spanke.
You know, we've had lots and lots of fascinating guests on our program, and she is among the most fascinating.
Yes,
I don't like
she
to
is.
pick a favorite among all of our various, children or whatever.
She's got quite a story.
She has a wonderful story.
Yeah,
and just, and sometimes it's the story of the person themselves that is so inspiring.
Yeah.
And
she's just so intelligent and so just well-spoken. And
yes, really just enjoyable and lively and interesting and all that stuff. So we hope you enjoy that. And so that'll be coming up in just a bit. We first want to put in a plug for a couple of things. First, let's plug the books that we're touting on this.
So we have Bruce's book that started this podcast, Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back. And the latest book, Reigniting the Spark, sorry.
That was the other one.
The latest book is not about communication, why everything you know about couples therapy is wrong.
Exactly. And so if you go to our website, ctn7.com, you'll find information about how to acquire those books. I also want to put in a little plug for a couple of little booklets that I've also put out recently.
Yes.
One of them is called 7 Words to Jumpstart Your Love Life. 7 Words to Jumpstart Your Love Life. What a provocative title, right?
I wonder what those 7 words can be.
Oh, I wonder what, yes.
Stick around when you'll find out.
Exactly. And you can go to Amazon.com and search for that and pay whatever it is I put on there, $2.99 or something for it. But why would you do that when you can get it for free?
How can you get it for free?
All you have to do is sign up for Dr. Chalmers' newsletter, which you can do right from ctn7.com. When you go to our podcast website, and you'll see there's a box that appears. Click on the box, sign up, make sure to confirm your email if I don't already have it, which for most of you I probably don't. And then you will get my newsletter. And along with that, when you get the first, get the acknowledgement of signing up, you will get a link that will take you right to a free download of that book that otherwise you could pay $2.99 on Amazon for.
Fantastic.
I might be running a 99-cent special when this airs. I don't remember, but you don't even pay 99 cents. Get it for free for crying out loud. All right. And then the other one, a much more recent book, I'll put out there too, which is called what the heck? I should have written it down. But it's called My Husband Complains About My Cleaning. What Do I Do? Hint, it's not about cleaning. And that's in response to hundreds of searches per month I have received that end up at a particular blog post from way back on the beginning of my blog, where it was someone, apparently lots of people, mostly women, I guess, are searching for the problem that their husbands keep complaining about their cleaning, and they're having a hard time with it. And so I wrote a book, which is, and it sounds like a excessively specific title. It's not. I mean, I cover a lot of the same stuff and apply it to that particular circumstance. So that one is available for sale on Amazon, and you can find that there as well. So I hope you'll check into all those things.
All right.
So without further ado, let us go to our interview with Hannah Spanke, and we will see you on the other side.
Our guest today is Hannah Spanke. Here's how Hannah describes her life. The long story short version of how I became who I am is this. I entered into the world of sex work, starting with prostitution at the age of 16, and stayed in that world for the next 7 years. Through lots of crazy, gut-wrenching experiences, including a 10-year alcohol and marijuana addiction in order to justify the life I was living, I eventually broke inside and saw how fucked my inner reality was becoming. At almost 23, I left the sex industry for good and spent the next 4 years deeply healing myself from the inside out. Now I work professionally as a relationship and life coach and board-certified clinical sexologist who is passionate about helping people see past their own limitations, traumas, and pain and grow into the version of themselves that everyone really wants to be deep down. Hannah, it's quite an intro. Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I suppose I wrote that, but it's been a minute. And so that was refreshing for me to hear back too.
It was delightful. I was just telling you before, for the benefit of our listeners, we were just talking before we started recording this, and I was noting, usually when we do an intro, we'll take what our guest says and, kind of put it into our own words and do it in the second person. But I was saying to Judy, what you wrote was just so much more interesting than anything we would have come up with, that I figured, well, we'll just quote you. So there we are.
Nice.
So tell us a little bit about that path, and well, I guess it's going to be more than a little bit about that path and how you got to where you are today. So I'd like to hear that in your own words.
Yeah. So, specifically the kind of transition out of it, is that what you're asking about?
Any part of it, in it, out of it?
Out of it.
Yeah, whatever you think you'd like to be talking about.
Okay, cool. So taking into consideration the show itself, I think kind of having a relationship angle is going to be helpful for the listeners.
The very thing,
absolutely.
Yes.
So when I entered into the sex industry at 16, I didn't consciously know that that's what I was doing. I did it. It was like a desperation out of a need. I'm going to do this thing, solve this one problem. I'll never do it again kind of a thing. And then that is not how it played out. It was a one-time occurrence. And then about a year later, I stepped back into the industry in other ways. I was still underage. I was still under 18. But I knew, at least in California, for house stripping companies where they're dancers for like bachelor parties or whatever, where it's not a physical brick and mortar location, you don't need a social security card. And so I had a fake ID and I was able to do that for a little bit. And then eventually I started working at an actual club once I was old enough. All throughout that time, pretty much from like 17 on, I was in serious relationships in my own personal life, like long-term relationships, anywhere. I had a couple that were like 2 or 3 month long kind of fling things, but most of them throughout the whole time that I was in that industry were 2 to 3 years at a time, these long-term relationships. And as you can imagine, it was always difficult. There was always a lot of conflict between what I was doing for money and what I was, trying to keep separate in my personal life, but it never really was separate because we can't really separate things like that. I was compartmentalizing it, but it was all still very much connected. So after so many years of this inner conflict and with the alcohol and the marijuana piece too, like successfully numbing myself enough to where I could stay a little bit dissociated, I could stay keeping those things in their own separate boxes. My boyfriends couldn't, it was really hard for them because and I have so much empathy for them now more than I did at the time. They were only seeing it from their perspective, their livelihood, anything to do with money or how they were surviving had nothing to do with me, with my work, that was only impacting me. And so I was justifying it in ways that they couldn't. And it just created a lot of conflict. So after a long enough time of me repeating the same pattern in relationships where I felt like I was always trying to prove myself, no, that's just for work. I really love you though. This is how much I'm willing to show you. And then I would overextend myself, overgive, put up with things that I didn't actually like. The run of the mill unhealthy relationship patterns. I was doing all of them to try to stay getting these like breadcrumbs of acceptance from my partners that didn't actually accept me fully. And eventually I woke up to the realization, like, inside, outside, same. Everything we're experiencing is a mirror. None of this is happening out of pure coincidence or accident. I'm choosing these partners because on some deep level, I don't approve of myself. And so this reflection of somebody that doesn't accept me is comfortable on some level, even though it's uncomfortable. It's familiar,
Yeah.
And so that awareness, it was a very, very hard time when I was really waking up to how disempowered I actually was living, because I was selling myself for years the story that I was so empowered, girl power, I'm choosing to do this. And now my whole philosophy on it is the complete opposite. And so waking up to the realities of like, wow, I'm creating so much suffering in my life, especially in my romantic life, and I'm the only one that can do anything about it. I truly was motivated by wanting to be in love. And so that was, and have it work, and so that was kind of the light bulb that led me to start doing the inner work to get out of that industry.
So did you come from a dysfunctional background growing up?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. So my parents separated when I was 5. My mom had a severe drug addiction for many, many years after that. So she left, and I was raised by my dad on his own for most of my childhood. And then I chose to go back with my mom late teens, which was when I had that first prostitution experience. She had demonstrated some of that. It was a very low income situation. I would ask for money for something for school or money for whatever. She'd say, I don't have it, but I can go get it. I'll go see so-and-so, I'll be back. She would leave and come back and have money, so it wasn't explicit, but it was in my face enough to where I was like, I know they're not giving you money for no reason, So that was one example. And then on my dad's side of things, his influence, he was always just very non-committal, real serial dater. He always had a girlfriend, but he always had like dating apps open, and he was always not calling them their girlfriend in conversations with other people, things like that. So it really painted this tone of like, it taught me, in essence, it taught me that I needed to do something, whatever the thing was. There was always this gap that I was trying to fill to be chosen. I witnessed my dad never choose a woman fully. And so I learned that was like the standard. I needed to present myself a certain way or do something good enough to be chosen. And when that wasn't working, the pain of not being chosen finally caught up with me. And I was like, oh, there's some inner work that needs to be done here so I can actually be a match for the partner and the relationship that I want.
Yeah. Wow. It's so interesting as you're telling that story. I'm reflecting on the couples that I've worked with for years. There's so many, especially women, much more than men, I think, especially women who could have told a very similar story, except for the sex work part. Do you know what I mean? It could have been very similar. It's like, I realized I really wasn't valuing myself. I thought I was, but I really wasn't. I hear that a lot from women. Well, you guys are the experts on women in the conversation at the moment, not to mansplain to either one of you guys, but that is it's interesting to hear, because it puts when people think about sex work, and it's one of the things we were fascinated by, Judy especially was listening to some of your podcasts, and I was catching part of them. And, it's fascinating to the stereotypes people have in their mind about people who do sex work. And, hearing you telling it, and I have over the years met other women who had a history of doing sex work, but it's fascinating how, what's the word I would use? Almost prosaic. It's like, well, it's just another way of enacting a lot of stuff that people enact different ways too. Does that make sense?
Yep. It's very like tabooized in our culture, but it's just one more expression of trauma and dysfunction, just like you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say that for our listeners, that the name of your podcast, Fuck Yourself Happy.
Yeah, could you explain that? I'm sorry.
I was going to ask you to explain that. And, I didn't want to go into too many details on our podcast, because there are other questions that I want to ask you about But I do recommend that people listen to it to hear your story because, it is such an interesting story of how you got to where you are. So I want to give them a little bit of taste on our show, but drive them to your show. So tell us how you came up with Fuck Yourself Happy.
Yeah. So the idea of a podcast has just been like looming over my head for so many years. And I like have wanted to do it, but all these excuses and procrastination and, just the same thing we all face when we want to do something new and exciting and scary, And so it was just this moment. It was like midnight. I was sitting on the floor of my office cleaning or doing something like just, I don't know, staying up late for no reason, one of those kind of nights. And it just hit me. I was like, fuck yourself happy. That's the title. And it was just the weirdest, most pure like download moment where I wasn't even thinking about the podcast. It has always been something in my mind to do, but in that moment it just came through and I was like, boom, ding, that's it. And so in that moment, I like got on Google, figured out how do you start a podcast? I stayed up till like 3 a.m. that night and I recorded my first episode and like everything right then and there. So it felt like some divine sort of inspiration in the moment, but it really clicked for me like in my human mind because it meant a few different things to me. Fuck yourself happy. For one, the literal act of like fucking yourself, like self-pleasure, masturbation, that kind of thing, has been such an integral part of my own healing journey and how I help people in their lives, couples with their sexual connection or just individual healing sexual trauma, getting more connected to their bodies, different things. Sexual healing has been such a big part of my journey and how I help people. And so that in the most literal sense, but also like, and I explained this in the first episode, so I won't over explain it, but also like, sometimes you just gotta like fuck yourself, like in a figurative sense of like, run your head into the wall a few times. Whatever it looks like in your own life for you to break through to the next level, like you got to just keep moving forward. And sometimes it feels like you're fucking yourself by doing that, but you just got to keep going and eventually the tides change. So
I will say you're very resilient. So how did you get from being in the sex trade to becoming a therapist?
Yeah. So they seem like very opposite ends of the spectrum, huh?
Oddly enough, and I'm the therapist, not so much, but please go on. I didn't do that, but I can relate to it, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I know I've heard like jokes here and there about like strippers being like therapists in disguise or whatever, because guys would show up to the club and just like, they take off their suit that they show to the world. And then it's just this like totally like unhinged version of themselves that they share with these girls that they do not know, that they think are liking them, that they're not really liking them. They're paying them for their, it's this weird fabricated dynamic where the guy is like, for whatever reason, comfortable to just like expose himself in a number of ways. And so there's some truth to that. I think a lot of girls in that industry, they're not treating it that way. They're just capitalizing on the guy's vulnerabilities or attention or whatever, which is what I believe the guy is consenting to by walking into that building. But I was conscious of it. I was aware. I was like, this is not normal. This is not a normal conversation that you'd have if I met this guy in the coffee shop. He's telling me a lot right now. And then as I transitioned out of the strip club, because it's just a very, very toxic, heavy environment, really dense for a lot of reasons, I left the environment because it was taking a toll on me, but I was still in the industry. I was still very tied to it. I didn't know how to get out at that point. And so I started seeing my clients privately, and it turned into like a full-blown escorting type of situation. And all of my clients in an even more private setting now, not in a little tiny dance booth, but now in like a hotel room, for example, they just got even more vulnerable and they were telling me more and more and more about themselves. And then, fast forward a few years when I stepped out of the industry and was really scrambling, thinking like, what can I do? What am I good at? What do I know? What do I have to offer? It was this other light bulb moment where I was like, I know so much about like that character and why their relationships are failing. I know so much and from such a like unique backdoor kind of way of why these men are stepping out of their marriages. Why aren't they talking to their wives? Why are they single at 50 when they have all this other success and all these things going on, and like, why are they emotionally available? Like all of these things I could see as something that I could really provide value for these men and the women that would end up being in their lives or were in their lives already.
So why are the men stepping out? Why are they cheating on their wives? Why are they doing all these things?
Yeah. So one of the things
what have you learned from that?
Yeah. So one of the things
I'm going to get you off the path for a moment, and then we'll come back to.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. One of the things I noticed the most consistently with all kinds of different types of guys was, because I would start asking personal questions. So why haven't you told your wife about this thing? Does your wife, what does she think about this? And it was so open to the point where I could ask them things like that. And most of their answers, 9 out of 10 times, they would say something like, oh, well, she doesn't really care about things like this, so I just don't tell her. Or she would say no if I told her, so I just like, she's not interested, I just don't bring it up. And so it wasn't like failing communication, like they were telling their wives XYZ and their wives were shutting them down. It was like they were shutting themselves down before they even allowed themselves to try. So maybe that came from years before in their relationship. They got told no a bunch of times for something, and now that's just internalized and they don't open up at all. That's for sure happening. But I think sometimes it was also just kind of like their comfort zone to not communicate vulnerably with their wife, and then that led them into.
I've just been writing about this. And it's interesting because the one thing guys tend not to say that I think is the word that we won't use is fear. The reason he's not talking to his wife is he's terrified, but he won't say he's terrified. He'll say she doesn't care, or she won't listen to me, or it won't do any good, which are all, yes, he's thinking that because underneath that, he's afraid to try. Because if he does, yes, indeed, she might say no. She might tell him all the ways that she's pissed off at him for a variety of things. Who knows what she'll say, but he's terrified of it. It is fascinating, the overlap between what you're describing and indeed what happens in therapy. And of course, I know you're not the first one to make that, or I'm not the first one to make that connection. People have noted that before. The idea that you're paying a therapist to care about you. And it seems artificial. And of course, to be an effective therapist, you have to genuinely care, but not genuinely care the way sometimes people start thinking you're doing, especially in individual therapy. That concept of transference, where sometimes people will just assume you're in this much deeper relationship than you better be.
Right.
So it is interesting. There's a very similar aspect to it. It makes sense to me a lot that, someone going in that kind of circumstance, someone going to someone who's being paid to seem to care about them, they're going to open up to, because we crave, as a species, we crave intimacy. It's one of my shticks. We want stability, but we also want intimacy, and stability without intimacy becomes destabilizing, and you end up with guys going to see strippers.
Yeah. I couldn't agree.
So let's get back to how you got into the therapy part of this.
Oh, I want to put in something there, actually, a little intermediate step, because you mentioned along the way, you finally were able to recognize you weren't really loving yourself. You thought you were, but you really weren't. And I'm just curious how you came to that moment. It's like what folks in 12-step programs will talk about is hitting bottom or something. I don't know if that was your experience, but I'm curious, what was that step? And then indeed, how'd you go from there to being a therapist, or a relationship coach?
Yeah. My come to Jesus moment. Yeah.
So,
I mean, when I think about it in hindsight, there were probably a lot of them, and I was just kind of bypassing them and like, oh, I'm not really ready to see that yet, and then now I can see them all in hindsight. But one moment, and I'll be quick with it because I could tell the story as if it's like a 3-day long experience, because it felt like it. So my boyfriend at the time, this was what I would consider my last like unhealthy relationship, when I was still totally in all of that programming, all of those old behaviors and lifestyle and everything before I started to change anything. This last relationship, it was on its last legs as well at this point. But I was starting to kind of want to be better for myself. I had quit drinking a few months before this, and I started doing this like really intense fitness mindset program. And over the course of about 3 months, I lost like 15 pounds and I got super in shape, as in shape as you could get in 3 months, you know? So I was like feeling amazing. I felt like $1 million. And my boyfriend at the time confessed to me that he felt like he was no longer sexually attracted to me, no longer interested in our sex life because I was, in his words, too skinny.
Oh my.
Wow.
So, right. And so
Takes all kinds. Well,
yeah, it was very, yeah. So it was, at first I heard him and I was like trying to be all conscious and guru. And I was like, thank you for telling me. It sounds like that was hard for you to say, and like trying to coddle him. And then it just like, it hit me and I was just crushed. I was crying and crying and crying in a way that I had not cried before. Like, it wasn't like, oh, you hurt my feelings about this thing. I'm a little bit upset. I'm sad about it right now. It was like, it hit something really, really deep that I was then releasing that I didn't even have the words to describe. Like, I was just pouring out this sadness. And I started to get all these images in my head of like being really young, having my dad or some other adult make like, probably joking at the time, but like inappropriate comments about my body or gaining weight or losing weight. And then all of the years in the sex industry, it was just this like full blown lucid moment of realizing how worthless I actually felt without my body image being like approved of. Like, it highlighted how enmeshed my self-worth was with my sexuality and how other people viewed my body. And that was my starting point. I was like, wow, what is the foundation for how much I love myself? It doesn't even exist. Like, it's totally built on external validation and physical looks and sexual expression. Like, it has nothing to do with who I actually am. And so that was really the moment when I was like, whoa, things are way worse than I thought, and I need to do something about it. So, long story short, I needed a lot of therapy. And then that opened my eyes to how much I had always been called to that line of work in general, just like healing, helping, you know. I remember being like 12 years old before I'd ever even kissed somebody, Googling like, what is a sex therapist? How do you become a sex therapist? Wow. And so it was, yeah, there were a lot of moments or that chunk of years where it was just like synchronicities after synchronicities of thinking like, wow, I've always been interested in this. Oh, that one time I was looking into sex therapy. That's crazy. Now that's what I need, you know? And so all these like full circle moments. And then I found something called Authentic Tantra, which is a trauma-informed holistic sexual healing modality rooted in Tibetan Buddhist Tantra. And I went deep into that for my own personal healing and then became licensed in it. And that is a big part of how I have helped people.
This might be an apt moment to sort of segue into something that you had mentioned. And one of the things that I saw on one of your materials, you mentioned spirituality, that you were, I think, yeah, how did you put it? Everyone needs spirituality in order to be happy. And I wonder, could you comment on what you mean by that? And I will throw in, you know, one of our shticks, the 7 words of couples therapy in 7 words: be kind, don't panic, and have faith. And faith, it's the way I define faith isn't necessarily, it's definitely not necessarily religious. There's an element of spirituality, and I would call it, but I'm curious, what do you mean by that? And, you know, how do you understand it?
Yeah, I love that. So for a little bit of context, I was like the most loud and proud atheist you've ever met for my whole childhood, teenage years. Like, the only narrative about anything to do with spirituality in my household was like, you're alive and then you die. Like, that's about it. Yeah. Everyone that goes to church is like cuckoo. That's about it. And so just a lot of judgment, no understanding, nothing, you know. So that's what I was exposed to young. And then when I was 19, I had a really, really intense experience of loss and grief in my life. And this was the first big loss of my life. And it impacted me in ways that I like, it doesn't even justify the impact to like try to put it into words, you know. It was just so like earth shaking, and it made me, it forced me open to be like it forced me to be more open to things that I had never been open to before. And so I started seeing different healers. I started seeing psychics and like mediums and meditating and having connections with my guides and my higher self and talking to water. Like, every single angle of spirituality I started to be interested in. And now it's like, I would say it's probably the more dominant part of my coaching, my work with people, my therapy. It's like, that's the real foundation of all of it. That like, this is an animated meat suit that we're all in, it's a body, it's a vessel, but like it's containing something. And it's not just your bones and your blood, like if you were just a body and you didn't have a spirit, you didn't have a soul, there wasn't some higher conscious essence inside of you, like you would be, I don't know, you'd be in the ground, you would just be a physical piece of something. You'd be like my desk in front of me. There's no life. And so to me, the essence of being alive is acknowledging that we are spirit, that we are something bigger than just what we can perceive with the 3D. And in comparison to how I lived my life up until that kind of rattling moment, I was so sad before, feeling disconnected from life in a bigger way. And I didn't know it at the time. But now I can see it in hindsight, like, wow, I keep getting this image of like circus in Vegas or something. Like it feels like your whole entire life is just being lived in this tent, like we're on earth and this is our whole life and this is everything. And like, what's the point is kind of the theme of that mindset. And that's how I felt in the past. And then now there's no limitation on it. There's no more tent. There's no more circus. It's like, we are connected to so much, to everything. We are everything. We are God. We are, so.
So how do you bring that into your practice when you deal with couples?
Yeah. So I have them, I guess this is probably everybody's approach to couples work because I feel like it has to be. But the way that I really consciously approach couples is individually. Like I really like working with, the individual person and then bringing that together for them as a couple so that I can help them narrate what is actually true for them, but couples problems, in my opinion, are never usually couples problems. They're individual problems that are manifesting as issues together, but they're separate problems. So, I like to help each person connect with whatever part of themselves they are the most disconnected from. And so from that holistic, more spiritual approach, it could be the spirituality piece, but it could also be something else. It could be their mindset. It could be, are they disconnected from their body? Do they have a weird relationship with sex? Are they like cynical about life? They don't believe in something bigger. They feel disconnected from God or unsupported from the universe or whatever. Like I try to find what is the weak link in that holistic like multidimensionality that makes us human. What's the weak link for each person so that can be strengthened and then the relationship can benefit as a byproduct.
That is so interesting and it's inspiring and, fits a lot with how I like to think about this as well. And it's interesting because my approach, the sort of logistics of my approach with couples is rather different from that. My bias is no, work together unless there's a compelling reason to have separate meetings. Different people will do that different ways. But that fundamental idea, at least what I'm hearing is fundamental there, and I've said this to couples quite a bit, what can a therapist offer you? There's a lot of ways of answering that question. But what I think the biggest thing I can offer them is faith. Which is, or you would call that sense of meaning, spirituality, that there is a point to all of this, even if we can't define it in words, that there is something meaningful about the whole project that, and again, this kind of implicit in what you're saying, that a couple's relationship is this quintessential example of relationships with the world and God and however you want to call that in general. And that's what a therapist can offer. It's that sense of, this is a meaningful connection. And I find that true even with couples who are splitting up, basically, because sometimes they'll consult me for help with that. And I recognize that sometimes that's the thing they have to do. Two good people who even love each other and they just cannot make a life together for understandable reasons. Even they that sense of acting with that sense of faith is what will help them. That's what will get them through it. Because that's, then they are free to exist in the world in an intimate way with the world and themselves and each other. And it'll come out okay. And that's kind of the assumption of whatever faith means. It means that reality is right to be what it is until you work with that. And it's interesting because you mentioned that the alternative to that is a sort of cynical view that would just say, life's a bitch and then you die. It's there being no point to it.
Yeah. I love all of that and agree completely. Like you said, the physical approach might be slightly different, but like the foundation of why you're approaching it that way and like what you have to offer feels very, very similar for me. And like what you said about reality right there, I think I say the same thing in different words, and it's so cliche sounding, but I say it all the time to myself and clients. Like, that's what was supposed to happen, because if it wasn't, it wouldn't have.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a great fan of reality. It's like, you know why that happened? Because it did.
Right.
It's like, apparently all the various forces converged and that's what you got,
Yes.
So you better work with it.
I love that.
Arguing with it. Yeah.
Like reframing everything as a gift, and not in a toxic positivity, like just spiritual bypassing, like, oh, let's blinders to all the bad stuff, because things are hard sometimes and that's valid. And none of it is purposeless. In my opinion, it all has value. The hard stuff, the easy stuff, the happy stuff, the sad stuff, like it all has value. And seeing the value in all of it, I think, and offering that to my clients can really help people get through a hard time together, even if they're separating. It can like create this sense of closeness that like, this is important for both of us individually, even if we're choosing to go our separate ways out of love, versus the common narrative of breakups that it's just horrible and hateful and like coming from negativity. I really like helping people rewrite that story. And then for couples that are thriving and just want to do better, or resolving something or repairing something, like the belief that this is something that you guys are now able to create intimacy from. Like, conflict can create intimacy and should create intimacy, in my opinion, when it's handled correctly. When it's done right, it brings you closer together.
Yeah.
And you do retreats too, don't you?
So I am officially, yes, but I have not hosted my first one yet. Yes.
So you're offering retreats.
You're offering retreats. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. What kind of retreats? Like what do you do? What do you plan to do? Let's put it that way.
So I do plan to host couples retreats starting next year. I originally was going to do that this year, and then I shifted gears and I have launched a women's retreat. It's going to be late October. And so I'm really excited about that. The date, a lot of stuff has changed about it, but now it's all set in stone for women in October. And relationship status is pretty irrelevant for that one. You can be married, you can be single, you can be lesbian, you can be straight, it doesn't matter. And that one is all about empowerment, women's empowerment, really allowing them to have the space to be seen and to be honored for whatever is real for them. No full permission to be as big and authentic and expressive as they need to be, want to be, in all areas, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, like all of it, so that they can reclaim that power that we have when we're authentic, and acknowledge and kind of close the chapters on anywhere they can see where they are not fully living in their power, and go back to their real life after the retreat, locked and loaded, ready.
Where is it going to happen? Like where
that one's going to be on the Big Island in Hawaii.
Oh, why?
I might need to take a retreat.
Yes. It's going to be really, really cool. I'm really excited.
Where are you located? It's funny, with folks, some people are seeing this on, audio or video, and some people are just hearing it. But in any case, nobody would know where we are. There's no such thing as where anymore. But I am curious, where are you?
Yeah. So currently I'm in Northern Kentucky. This has been an odd stint of my life, but I'm moving back to California, which is where I'm from. And I'm going back to San Diego in a little less than 2 weeks, actually. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, neat.
Yeah. Where are you guys?
We're in Vermont.
Okay. Is it still snowing?
No,
It's in
amazingly.
the 80s.
We just had and that was
Wow.
a record.
Yeah.
That's unusual for
Yesterday
April
was
in Vermont.
88 degrees up here.
Yeah, that broke records by a number of degrees. It's really strange right at the moment, but
So getting back to all the other stuff and that, how did dealing with trauma, when you are dealing with patients or your clients that come to you with certain traumas, how do you help them process that?
Yeah, so there's a few things that come to mind that are just really like staples for everybody that I work with that I'll touch on, but I also like to just really get a feel for like who is in front of me. Is it a man? Is it a woman? Is it more than one person? Do they have where is their comfort zone for processing things? I like to get a feel for that. Like, are they going to appreciate more of a mental, like, let's talk through it approach? Are they going to appreciate me leading them through some sort of embodiment experience where they can just go straight into it? They don't need to understand. I try to get a feel for who's in front of me, because I know for me, I can be very cognitive. And so when someone is trying to lead me through something that I don't understand, I'm in like full resistance, so I like to cater to whoever's there. But one of the things I repeat 100 times with everybody is it's not who you are, it's what you learned. It's not who you are, it's what you learned. It's not who you are, it's what you learned. And I'll say that again and again and again and again with them, because we naturally identify with the things that we've been through over time. I'm an anxious person. I'm a depressed person. No, you're not. You learned how to have anxious tendencies. You learned how to cope with life through the experience of anxiety. That's not who you are. And so the first thing I can really help people with is unpeeling those things, realizing that your identity is something that is created and it can be changed over time. And the parts of it that are not feeling helpful for you, the parts of it that feel like obstacles or like something negative or like something that is a challenge for you personally, those are parts of your identity that probably aren't actually who you are. They're probably things that you learned that you believed because you were so young, it just got stamped on you like a footprint. You now believe that's who you are, but it's not. And so giving them the permission to have like a space, like a buffer of space around them between who they think they are and who they might actually be. And giving them that little permission slip can be really, really helpful. And then the other thing I like to use is the example of a cell phone, because we all have smartphones. We all get that, that physical, tangible example. You have an iPhone, let's say you have 100 gigabytes on your iPhone of storage. When your iPhone gets to that 98 gigabytes or 99 or whatever, you start getting the thing on your phone every 5 minutes that says like iPhone storage full, you need to clear your phone out. Things in your phone start malfunctioning. They start acting weird. They start not working. Your apps will shut down at random. You can't post something all day long. Things get deleted, whatever. Same exact thing happens with your nervous system. Like your nervous system, we could think of it just like a cell phone. It takes data in and it stores it when it isn't fully released. If you take a picture, you delete it in your phone, that was like a full process. It went all the way through your phone. The example for the nervous system, if you experience something and you're able to process it and it's fully felt, let go of, that was a full, complete experience. When we experience something that isn't able to be completed, like let's say you get really stressed out at work because of something, but because you're sitting in a business meeting, you can't stand up and scream. And so that stress response gets now trapped in your body. It's never completed. Then that's like 1 gigabyte of storage is taken up. Another gigabyte of storage is taken up. And eventually our nervous systems get, just like an iPhone, too full.
Yeah. Then
we start to malfunction. We can't take a deep breath. We can't sit still without tapping our foot. There's something going on that's like, we're overstimulated, we're dysregulated. And so that's usually a definition, I guess, or explanation of trauma and conditioning that people can easily understand.
You're kind of like the poster child, I would say, for you're not who you were.
Yep.
So if you could go back and talk to that 16-year-old who's about to put that ad on Craigslist, soliciting men, what would you say to her?
I have there's different answers to this question in my head that are like opposites. So from the one angle of if you could go back and change anything.
Not change, say to her.
Right.
Okay. So, or change, well, I'll let you take it.
Yeah. So on one hand, I on one hand, I like the idea of being able to go back and tell her, like, you don't have to do these things. You are good enough. You are valuable. You can, you have so much more to offer than what you might think, and give her the encouragement that she was missing that allowed her to be in that position. But at the same time, like, just like what we said a minute ago, like, if it happened, that's what was supposed to happen, because if it wasn't, I wouldn't have, like, I wouldn't change anything, truly, if I had the power to. And so I would just, like, it'd be more of like a buckle up kind of a conversation of like, you're going to be okay. You're going to go through some shit. You're going to be okay. And all of it is going to be something that is your gift in the future. It's like turning the mess into the magic, your pain into your purpose. Like, this is something that is going to be a lot bigger than you. And it's like the fire that you have to walk through so that you have access to this medicine inside of yourself to bring to other people. So just prepare and you're gonna be all right. That's
that answer, it's very similar to, on occasion, I've met with people who are like paralyzed in an accident, for example. And, some years later, by the time I'm talking to them, I'm usually not seeing them like right after that. Right. And that question, if it ever comes up, or they'll tell me, people have asked them, would you get in the car or would you get on the motorcycle if you knew, and, on the one hand, who wants to go through an accident, on the other hand, they will say, but I like who I am, and I would not be who I am now if I hadn't gone through that. So I wouldn't change a thing. And it's really quite remarkable. And that, when I think of sort of the epitome of faith, that's what I mean by faith. It's that sense of reality's right to be what it is. Isn't that interesting? It's like, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, and yet here it is. And look how we all turn out. Isn't that amazing?
Makes you what you are.
It makes you what you are. Exactly. And what you are is right, even when you still want to make some changes, but what you are is right. That's the fundamental sense of faith. And that's, it's interesting. I was also thinking, Hannah, as you said that had you not gone through all of that, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You wouldn't be helping the people that you help. You wouldn't have the insights to help people. That's another thing I've heard from lots of folks who have survived various kinds of trauma, that when they have processed it, again, they'll say similar things, grateful for what I learned, even though it was really hard. And also, wow, I have such a better sense of empathy for people who've gone through things like that than I would have had without it. And I value that learning, even though I had to suffer a lot to get there, which I just think is amazing.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I can say that's true for sure for me. I was so arrogant as like a 15-year-old child. I thought I knew everything. I had every answer to everything, and everyone that was doing it any other way was wrong.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. And so, like, going through my whole thing that I've gone through now, that's, I couldn't even think that way if I tried. Like, it's a joke to say it.
Yeah. Well, that's what we think when we're 15. We know everything.
It is. Well, and I can't resist a plug for my most recent book. The subtitle of my most recent book, the title is "It's Not About Communication," which is already a little provocative. And the subtitle is "Why Everything You Know About Couples Therapy is Wrong." And I point out in the last chapter, by the way, it's not just you. Everything I know about couples therapy is wrong also. Simply by way of saying, yeah, when you think you know shit, when you think you better look at that, because you really don't. And I know that. And as what an odd thing for an old man to be able to say, gee, I'm capable of a lot of arrogance. I've been my whole life. But I think what happens as I get older is at least I can recognize it. At least I can say, well, I know I'm being arrogant, and it's kind of silly because deep down I know better, but there it is.
Yeah. With the authentic Tantra part of my education, the Tibetan Buddhist roots of it, I've learned a lot about Tibetan Buddhism in the last few years because of that, and a lot of the teachings. And it's really interesting. It's a very it's humbling to learn about these teachings and what all of these enlightened masters and Buddha type people, what their experience of enlightenment is, because it's often described as almost it's nothing. It's nothingness, it's emptiness. There's no attachment. There's no good. There's no bad. It just is. And to wrap your head around that when you're coming from any place of ego is impossible. It's it really highlights where your ego's still alive and where that arrogance might still be, because it's that can't be enlightenment, you know? Who am I to say that, you know? So it's just funny.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, tell folks how they can get in touch with you, find out more like about your retreat, things like that. Website, please let us know, and we'll put it on the screen and put it in the notes that go along with this podcast.
Cool. So my home on the internet, I would say, is Hannah Spanke on Instagram. So Instagram is like where I post stuff pretty much daily, free content. It's a really good place for people to kind of like plug in, click the follow button once, and then I'll be there, and you can interact and see how I do things. And if you're interested, you can always reach out there and we can connect more. So Instagram at Hannah Spanke. I'm also on TikTok, same name at Hannah Spanke. Facebook as well. Facebook is usually more personal for me rather than work, but I'm there if you're there. And if you have any questions or anything and you're not on social media, hannahspanke@gmail also always works for any outreach or anything you might want to know. And then my website is currently being rebuilt, but if you go to hannahspanke.com, you can sign up for my emailing list, and then you'll get all the updates and everything from there.
And that's Spanke, Spanke.
Yes.
For people who are just hearing it. Yes.
I meant to say thank you for saying my name correctly, because usually people don't.
It would have been the first question I would have asked had we not heard other folks saying it on podcasts. So, yes.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, so Spanky like the Little Rascals, but SP.
Oh yeah, right.
But
with an E, not a Y.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. This has been very enjoyable.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Hannah as much as we enjoyed having her on our show.
And we did indeed. And as I mentioned in the intro, I trust you folks weren't disappointed. It was just a really fun interview.
Yes, and check out her podcast because, as I mentioned during our podcast, she's got quite the story and very interesting. Indeed.
So we would also like to remind you about the books that are available to you, the two books that you can actually get in paperback, which are
It's Not About Communication, Why Everything You Know About Couples Therapy Is Wrong, and Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back.
Available anywhere books are sold, or you can get information about that from our
also
website.
on audio books too.
Also, yes. Both
audio
of
and
those,
ebook.
Audio and ebook,
Yes.
all three formats for both of those.
On your website.
Available, right from ctn7.com.
ctn7.com,
there's a link to it as well. And you can get a hold of those. And of course, I hope you will. And I hope you'll review them and all that kind of stuff. And also, something we didn't mention earlier, when you go to our website, ctn7.com, you can find our merch. For those of you who are just hearing this and not seeing it, what you're not seeing is our beautiful Couples Therapy in 7 Words mugs in the 11 and 15 ounce sizes. They have the logo on one side and the inspiring message,
Be kind, don't panic, and have faith,
on the other. That's the 7 words.
You can get it on t-shirts. You can get it on our beautiful tote bags.
Yes.
Lightweight.
I pushed the tote bag. It's really nice.
It's a nice. I've been using it.
Yeah, it's a nice tote bag. Yeah. We've been carrying that around, and it's nice and sturdy and beautiful. Nice design. So you can get that from our website. Also, of course, we had a guest today, and we have other guests coming up. And
if you would like to be a guest on our podcast, you can sign up on our website to be a guest. And I know we haven't had a listener question lately because none of them have fit our topics, but we do have some in the back burner coming up. So if you have a listener question, feel free to write us. Go to ctn7.com. You can write Bruce at ctn7.com or Judy at ctn7.com.
And just go to ctn7.com and you will find there's a place you can press a button and send us a message. And you can suggest, of course, yourself. You can write us a question or suggest yourself as a guest and or suggest someone else as a guest. And we've had as I've mentioned before, pretty much everybody who has suggested themselves as a guest has been appropriate. I can't think of any exceptions off the top of my head. No, if you think you'll be good, you probably will be. So we are always interested in that as well. So I believe we've covered the...
I think we have.
Oh, yeah. Just one more thing.
One more thing.
Sign up for my newsletter. We mentioned that in the intro, but I want to repeat that. Sign up for Dr. Chalmers' newsletter. You can do that right from ctn7.com. When you do that, you will get at no cost, for free, a free download of my most recent booklet, or one of my most, not my most recent anymore, one of my most recent booklets, 7 Words to Jumpstart Your Love Life. A fun, summary of a lot of the stuff we talk about, specifically applied to that issue of, gee, how do you get that to spark up your love life? Mm-hmm. So I hope you will do that as well. And so until next time,
remember, be kind,
don't panic,
and have faith.